Story number 1. I never thought hiking could turn into a nightmare until that day. It was supposed to be an adventure, just me and my friends exploring the bamboo forests of the Philippines. People talked about it being haunted, but we laughed it off. How naive we were. Our group, 5 of us in total, started the hike early in the morning. The air was cool, and the sunlight filtered through the dense bamboo stalks, creating a peaceful, almost magical atmosphere. We were in high spirits, joking and laughing as we trekked deeper into the forest. As the day wore on, the forest seemed to change. The paths became more twisted and confusing. We joked about the forest trying to keep us, but our laughter was less confident now. The light dimmed, swallowed by the thick bamboo canopy above, and a chilling silence enveloped us. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "We should head back," said Alex, the most practical among us. But when we tried to retrace our steps, we couldn't find the path. Panic began to set in. We were lost. That's when we heard it. A rustling, not just the sound of the wind, but something deliberate moving towards us. We froze, straining our ears. The rustling stopped as abruptly as it had started, replaced by an oppressive silence. Probably just an animal. I tried to sound brave, more for my sake than anyone else's. We decided to keep moving, hoping to find our way out before dark. But the forest seemed to twist and turn against us, leading us in circles. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, we were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from our weak flashlights. That's when disaster struck. Sarah, always the klutz, tripped over a hidden root and fell hard. We rushed to her side, finding her in pain, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. She couldn't walk, and panic surged through me like a tidal wave. We were lost, night had fallen, and now one of us was seriously injured. We did our best to make Sarah comfortable, but we could hear the rustling again, closer this time. It was no animal. Someone, or something, was out there, using the dense bamboo to its advantage, moving silently through the darkness. We huddled together, trying to stay quiet, hoping whatever was out there would just pass by. But it didn't. Instead, it seemed to circle us, a predator playing with its prey. Our flashlights flickered over the bamboo, catching glimpses of something moving just beyond the light's reach. Our imaginations ran wild with fear, every shadow a threat. The night dragged on, an endless cycle of fear and pain. Sarah's cries of discomfort pierced the silence, and each sound from the forest sent us into a fresh panic. We were trapped, unable to move, unable to escape. Dawn seemed to take an eternity to arrive, but with the first light of day, we gathered our courage. We had to get out, to find help for Sarah. Leaving her with 2 of our friends, Alex and I ventured out, determined to find a way out of this nightmare. The forest, so menacing in the dark, seemed less threatening in the daylight. But the sense of being watched never left us. We walked for what felt like hours, shouting for help at the top of our lungs, until finally we heard a response. Rescuers found us mid-morning, led to us by our shouts. Getting Sarah out was difficult, but eventually we made it back to civilization. The rescue team listened to our story in disbelief, telling us no one lived in the forest, that it was indeed considered haunted, but not by humans. We all recovered from that night physically, but the emotional scars remained. We never talked about what we thought we saw in the forest, the shadows that seemed too deliberate to be mere tricks of the light. The experience bonded us in a way nothing else could, a shared ordeal that we'd never forget.
Story number 2.
I never believed in the Hungry Ghost Festival. To me, it was just another tradition, something my grandparents fretted over with incense sticks and offerings. But that was before everything changed, before I learned respect the hard way. It was August in Singapore, the air thick with humidity, and the streets alive with the buzz of the festival. My friends, Gia, Ming, and Farah, and I had always been the adventurous sort, seeking thrills where we were told to tread lightly. We thought it fun to mock the old tales, to prove we were beyond such superstitions. How wrong we were. One evening, as the city prepared to honor the spirits with elaborate rituals, we found ourselves at the heart of the festival's celebrations. The streets were lined with food offerings, joss sticks, and paper lanterns, casting long shadows as if the night itself stretched its fingers. Despite the festive atmosphere, a solemn air lingered, a reminder of the respect owed to the visiting spirits. "Let's play a game," Gia suggested, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Let's see who can snatch the most offerings without getting caught." I hesitated, the weight of unspoken taboos pressing down on me. But the thrill of the challenge, egged on by my friend's laughter, pushed my doubts aside. We split up, darting through the crowds, our hands brushing against the food and joss papers laid out on the sidewalks. It was fun at first, a rush of adrenaline, harmless pranks on a night that felt endless. But then, Ming screamed. We found him on the ground, his ankle twisted at an unnatural angle, pain etched across his face. "It was just a slip," he gasped. But the look in his eyes told a different story. Fear had taken hold, a fear that spoke of ancient warnings ignored. We should have stopped then, should have heeded the silent cries of the night. But we were foolish, blinded by youth and arrogance. The game continued, each act of defiance a notch in our belt of bravado. The next accident struck Farah. A sudden fever, so severe she could barely speak, her skin burning to the touch. We rushed her home, confusion and dread knotting our stomachs. "It's just bad luck," Gia insisted, but her voice wavered, betraying her uncertainty. The festive lights no longer seemed inviting. They were now a glaring spotlight on our disrespect. I lay awake that night, the silence of my room oppressive. The shadows seemed to move, whispering secrets I had long refused to hear. The realization of our folly crept in, cold and unrelenting. We had mocked a tradition steeped in respect and remembrance, and now we were paying the price. The next day we gathered at Ming's, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken fears. We were a group united not by adventure, but by a shared dread. We spoke in hushed tones, our bravado stripped away, leaving only the raw edge of vulnerability. "We need to make this right," Farah whispered, her voice hoarse. The decision was unanimous, a desperate bid for forgiveness from those we had wronged. We returned to the festival streets, this time with humility as our guide. We bought offerings, carefully selected for their significance, and laid them out with reverent hands. Each joss stick we lit was a silent prayer, an apology whispered to the night. As the smoke curled towards the heavens, a figure approached us. An old man, his eyes deep with the wisdom of years we had yet to understand. He watched us for a moment, his gaze piercing through the veil of our intentions. "You have learned a hard lesson," he said, his voice a blend of sorrow and forgiveness. "Respect is not a game to be played with. The spirits you mocked are not so forgiving." We listened, hearts heavy as he told us of a young man, wronged years ago during the festival, his spirit restless, seeking acknowledgement, seeking respect. Our actions had stirred old grievances, inviting misfortune upon ourselves. "Is there a way to make amends?" I asked, desperation coloring my voice. The old man nodded, directing us to a neglected corner of the festival grounds. There we found a small, forgotten altar, dust-covered and surrounded by discarded debris. It was here we directed our efforts, cleaning and restoring, paying homage to the forgotten spirit with offerings of food, drink, and sincere apologies. The work was cathartic, each action a step towards redemption. As night fell, a sense of peace settled over us, a feeling that our apologies, though late, had been accepted. In the days that followed, Ming's ankle healed with surprising speed, and Farah's fever broke as suddenly as it had arrived. We spoke little of what had happened, a mutual understanding binding us. The festival ended, and life returned to its usual rhythm, but the lessons we learned remained. The Hungry Ghost Festival is no longer a subject of mockery for us. It is a time of respect, of honoring those who came before, and the traditions that shape our present. As for the old man, we never saw him again. Some say he was the guardian of forgotten spirits, others a reminder of the consequences of disrespect. To us, he was the bearer of a lesson we will never forget. Respect is not given because it is demanded. It is earned through understanding and humility. We learned the hard way, through fear and consequences, but it is a lesson we will carry with us always, a reminder that some traditions hold deeper meanings, reaching beyond the veil of the seen into the heart of the unseen. Story number 3. It was the kind of hot summer evening that made the air in Delhi feel like soup. I was on the train heading home from college, trying to lose myself in a book to forget the heat. The train was crowded, the kind of crowded where personal space is a myth, and you learn to breathe in whatever little air you can find. My name is Ria, and this is the story of how a regular train ride home turned into something I could never have imagined. The train rattled and screeched along the tracks, stopping at station after station, as people got on and off. That's when I first saw her, Mira, though I didn't know her name then. She boarded the train at Rajiv Chowk, her eyes scanning the compartment, looking for an empty seat that didn't exist. She stood near the door, clutching her bag close, just another face among many. But then, something changed. A man, bulky and with a mean look in his eyes, started inching closer to her. At first, it seemed like the usual push and shove of a crowded train, but then I saw his hand reach out, brushing against her arm, once, twice, and then again with a smirk that made my stomach churn. Mira tried to move away, but the train was too packed. She caught my eye for a moment, a silent plea. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there. "Hey," I called out, my voice louder than I expected. The man turned to look at me, surprised. "Leave her alone. Can't you see she's not interested?" The train had gone quiet. It's not every day that someone speaks up against harassment openly. The man scowled at me, his face darkening. "Mind your own business," he spat out. "It is my business when I see someone being bothered," I retorted, feeling my heart pound. I was scared, but I couldn't back down. Mira moved closer to me, her eyes thanking me. The man muttered something under his breath, and then, as if thinking better of it, turned away and disappeared into the crowd at the next station. Mira and I sat down, the space around us magically opening up. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Mira." "I'm Ria," I replied. "And don't mention it. No one should have to go through that." We talked then about college, about our hopes, and about how sometimes the world seemed too daunting. The train continued its journey, the inside lights flickering as it moved through the dark outside. But when I got up to leave at my station, Mira didn't. "Aren't you getting off here?" I asked. "No, I have a little further to go," she said, smiling. "Thanks again, Ria." I nodded, stepping off the train, the doors closing behind me with a hiss. As the train pulled away, I glanced back, trying to see Mira through the window, but she wasn't there. I figured she must have moved seats, and I walked home, the night air cooling my flushed cheeks. The next day, the incident was a distant memory as I boarded the train again. That's until I saw the news on a co-passenger's phone. A girl had gone missing from the train last night. My heart stopped as I leaned in to see the photo clearer. It was Mira. Panic surged through me. I had to tell someone, anyone, what had happened. But as I recounted the story to the officials, I could see the disbelief in their eyes. There was no record of Amira boarding the train, no CCTV footage of her at any station. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind except my memory of her. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Mira continued with no leads. I couldn't shake off the guilt, the feeling that maybe I could have done more, stayed with her until she got off the train, made sure she was safe. The incident sparked a discussion about safety on trains, about how we, as a society, need to stand up for each other. But amidst the debates and the safety measures, I couldn't help but feel a deep, unsettling sorrow for Mira, the girl who disappeared without a trace, and for all the silent voices that go unheard every day in the hustle of life. I never found out what happened to Mira, but I've never forgotten her. She changed me, taught me the importance of looking out for one another, even in the face of fear. Sometimes, I still catch myself looking for her face in the crowds, hoping for a sign that she's okay, that she's out there somewhere, safe and sound.